Hey everyone,
Hey guys.
welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Tonight we're going to be talking about the most common and the highest paying settings for travel therapists. It's something we've kind of touched on in a lot of videos over the years, but recently we got a few questions on it, and I was trying to direct people to an article or a video we had on this topic and realized that we'd never made anything directly on what settings are the most common for travelers and also what settings pay the most for travelers. So we wanted to make this, wrote an article about this, and we also wanted to make a video discussing, what settings are the most common for people that are getting into travel therapy, that, they want to know if their setting that they want to work in, is it possible for them to take travel contracts in that setting regularly, or if they should stay at a perm job. So Whitney's going to introduce us, and I'm going to give this video shared in a few different groups.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in with us tonight. If you are newer to our page, we are Whitney and Jared Kazaza, and we're both traveling doctors of physical therapy. We've been travel PTs for over 8 years now. We both started when we were new grads in 2015, and we've been travelers pretty much ever since. Now, we don't work full-time as travel therapists anymore. We did use travel therapy in order to get into a good financial position, and now we are what we call semi-retired, and we only work part-time as physical therapists in general, so we usually take about one contract a year or so. It's actually been over a year since our last contract, so we'll see when our next one's going to be. But yeah, we've been in the travel space for going on 9 years now since we first started doing our research back in 2014, before we ever started. So each week, if you are newer to our page, each week we try to bring you some new educational information about travel therapy. We've done hundreds of videos over the years. You can find most of those on our podcast and on YouTube in the more recent years especially. But yeah, as Jared mentioned, this is a topic that we've never really hit head on. So we wanted to bring some information and insight to you guys about what are the most common settings, why are they the most common settings, and also which ones tend to pay the best. So Jared's going to share our video in a couple of groups so more people can tune in on Facebook Live with us. Shout out to those of you that will listen later on the replay. We appreciate you as well. If you are watching live with us tonight on Facebook, we would love if you would say hello in the comments and let us know that you're there. I see that a few of you have signed on already. Just say hi in the comments. Let us know who you are. Are you a travel therapist? Are you a student? Are you someone who's thinking about doing travel therapy in the new year? Let us know. While we are getting geared up here, I do have a few announcements as well. It is so hard to believe that next week is already Thanksgiving. We have about 6 weeks left in 2023. So there's a lot of things to be thinking about as we come to the end of the year. One of those is right now is open enrollment for insurance. So if you're thinking about switching from your current job to travel therapy, or whether you're a current travel therapist or you're a new grad, you might be thinking about insurance right now. This is the time of year when you can generally switch your insurance plan. So it's a good time to kind of reassess your plan and see if you want to make changes for the new year. I actually just enrolled in my new insurance plan for the new year. I went through the government marketplace. There are some other options. A lot of times travel therapists are better off going through their employer, and you don't always have to wait until open enrollment. You can actually become eligible to enroll in a new plan every time you finish a contract. So that's something to keep in mind. But for some of you, you might want to take advantage of this open enrollment time. If you are considering private insurance, reach out to us. We can connect you with a private insurance advisor. I was on a private insurance plan. I decided to switch to one of the government marketplace plans for some various reasons coming up in the new year. So yeah, just, you have different options, but we just want to remind you that right now is a really good time to look at your different options, and then send us a message if you have questions about switching to a new option. Also, with Thanksgiving coming up next week, there are going to be some Black Friday sales. You're going to see every company out there is doing Black Friday sales. We are going to be hosting a Black Friday sale for MedBridge. So this is an important time of year as well, with only 6 weeks left to be thinking about your CEUs. I know I personally have a lot of CEUs due for my athletic training certification. My PT license, I don't have any due this year, but for athletic training, I do. So I've been working on my own MedBridge. So keep an eye out on our page starting tomorrow, which will be Monday, November 20th. So I believe it'll be Monday the 20th through Friday the 27th is how long our MedBridge sale will be going on. So check that out if you also need some CEUs for the year. And then also with the end of the year right around the corner, we are going to be doing our end of year giveaways. For those that aren't familiar, we do several giveaways at the end of the year. The biggest one is for people that took contracts with our recommended travel therapy recruiters. So if you're listening to this and you know that you have gotten recruiter recommendations from us in the past year or two, and this year you've taken a contract with one of our recommended recruiters, you're already eligible for this giveaway. All you have to do is fill out the entry form and just give us a little bit of feedback about your experience, and then we'll get you entered for that giveaway. 5 different therapists that took contracts with our travel therapy recruiters are going to win each a $200 gift card. So really great giveaway there, about $1,000 worth of prizes. Also, we'll be giving away a prize to one person who leaves us a review on either Apple Podcasts or our Facebook page. So go leave us a review and then send us a screenshot if you want to get entered to win that one. Anybody can do that one. You don't have to have done anything else before. You could be a student, you could be a clinician. If you just want to leave us a review and send it to us, then we'll get you entered for that one.
All right, so the first thing to cover here in terms of like what settings are most common, what settings pay the highest, you have to think about why a facility might need a travel therapist, and there's a variety of reasons for that. The most common reason is that they're having trouble filling a permanent position. So that's when we first started traveling, we didn't think that that was why most places would need therapists. We thought it might be like, maternity leave or short-term disability or something like that. But what you find out as you travel more is that the majority of clinics that you go to, the reason they're pulling in travelers is because they're trying to hire a permanent person, but they're just not able to for whatever reason. Maybe it's the location's not great. Maybe there's just a huge demand in that area and there's just not enough therapists there to fill the need.
A lot of times it's because it's rural. We've worked in a lot of rural locations where it's not necessarily a bad facility. It's just that it's more rural, and so they don't have a lot of candidates in the area that have the degree to be a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist, and there aren't a lot of new candidates wanting to move to that area because maybe there's not a lot of prospects for a partner, or maybe there's no industries in that rural area for an existing partner. So they don't have a lot of, fresh blood moving into that area. So we find that a lot. A lot of our contracts have just been in rural areas where they just have trouble getting long-term staff.
So with that in mind, if you think about what settings across the country for permanent jobs, what are most common? It's the general settings like skilled nursing, home health, outpatient, acute care, inpatient rehab. Those are, the big areas where there's a ton of jobs. So if you know that there's a lot of jobs in those areas, that's also where there's going to be a lot of travel jobs, right? If you think about permanent jobs, you don't see a ton of pediatric openings. You don't see a ton of like pelvic floor openings. You don't see a lot of like very sports focused openings, right? Because those are more specialty settings. And since that is the case, you also don't see many travel jobs in those settings. So we find that sometimes people think that travel is like its own setting, and it's not its own setting. It's just filling a short-term need in long-term permanent job settings while they try to fill that opening permanently.
Yeah. And as Jared mentioned, if you look at the broad spectrum of jobs that are available in the whole country, in one city, just for a permanent job opening, if you go and look on Indeed or one of those sites that lists job openings, you might see 10 skilled nursing openings and 10 general outpatient openings. And it might only be occasionally in that one city, even for a permanent job, that you would see one pelvic health specialist, one outpatient neurospecialist. Those settings just aren't as common in general for permanent jobs, so they're definitely not as common for travel jobs. The other thing is, those jobs don't tend to sit open for very long because the people that are looking to specialize in that area, that have gone out of their way to get specialty certifications to be a pelvic health specialist, to be, NCS certified a neurospecialist, to be an outpatient orthopedic sports medicine advanced clinician. If they've gone out of their way to get those specialties and do those certifications, there's going to be more applicants for those jobs, and they're not going to just sit open, whereas you might have, again, 10 to 1 of that general orthopedic outpatient or that general hospital setting.
So we get those questions pretty often. It's like, well, I want to be a hand therapist. Can I find travel therapy hand assignments, essentially? And yes, you can. But there's not going to be, 400 openings like there might be for skilled nursing. There might be 2 or 3 in the country at any given time. So if you do want to be very specific in a specialty setting, you can find those in some cases, but you just need to be very flexible on the location and also on the pay, because a lot of times the specialty settings counterintuitively don't pay as high as you would think they would. Sometimes perm jobs, you can get really high pay in specialty settings. Travel jobs are usually not that way, and I think a lot of that is because those jobs are pretty competitive. Like usually if a hand specialty job opens or a pelvic floor specialty job opens, they get a lot of applicants, which means that they don't have to offer a really high pay rate to attract travelers.
Yeah. So with that in mind, we've kind of already alluded to it. What are the most common settings? I actually did a poll on our Instagram on this the other day, and I was surprised a significant number of people voted that they thought the most common setting for travel jobs was outpatient orthopedics. And I know that a lot of our followers are physical therapists, and a lot of our followers will get questions all the time now from newer followers that'll be like, do you have to only work in outpatient to be a traveler? And we're like, what?
Or we'll get this question, this always cracks us up. People will say, well, I don't have anybody to travel with. Can I still travel? And it's funny because like the majority of travelers are single travelers, but all like they see us as a couple and they see some other Instagram accounts as couples and they think that all travelers are couples. But it's just like this this bias of seeing certain people when in reality that's not really representative of the whole population.
Yeah, and then I don't know if it's because they see a lot of people on Instagram who prefer outpatient like us, if they think that's all there is. But no, the vast majority of travel jobs are actually in skilled nursing. That's the most common setting. You're just going to see hundreds and hundreds of skilled nursing and long-term care jobs available for travel therapy. Now, I will say outpatient orthopedic jobs have increased for travel therapists since COVID. Back before COVID, when we were taking our travel therapy jobs between 2015 and 2019, it was a lot harder for us to find outpatient orthopedics, and that's what we wanted. But there were hardly any, especially as a pair, it was a lot harder to find two outpatient jobs together. Now, there's a lot more than there used to be, but still, the vast majority is skilled nursing. So if you like skilled nursing and that's an area that you prefer to work, there's going to be a ton of skilled nursing openings. Skilled nursing, and then sometimes it'll include long-term care, assisted living, just depending on the building.
Yeah, so the most common, like Whitney said, definitely skilled nursing or long-term care. There's been times in the past when 50% of jobs out there that are open for travelers are in skilled nursing. Right now, it's not as bad. It's probably somewhere between a quarter and a third of the jobs open are skilled nursing or long-term care. Second is almost always home health. And this has been a pretty consistent trend for the entire time we've been traveling. It's not like a new thing. Skilled nursing, home health are usually at the top two. After that, it used to be that acute care, inpatient rehab, those were kind of next, but recently that's been more outpatient jobs. So it goes skilled nursing, home health, outpatient, acute care, and then schools in terms of like the general settings. And then like we talked about, specialty settings are going to be way, 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 way down there. So you might see 3 pelvic health openings in the whole country, while there might be 500 skilled nursing openings in the country.
Yeah, and that list is kind of generalized. It's definitely more geared toward our PT audience, that skilled nursing, home health, outpatient hospital, schools. Now, if you're an SLP, it's going to be more geared towards skilled nursing than schools, than the others. Definitely schools are a lot more common for for SLPs, and then it's kind of a toss-up for OT. OT is still kind of like that skilled nursing, schools, but then outpatient and home health are still up there for OT. But yeah, if you're an SLP, definitely you're going to see a ton of schools. It may even be with certain companies who see more schools than skilled nursing, but I would say as far as medical settings, still skilled nursing is your most common.
Yep. And we were talking a little bit about why people might think there's way more outpatient jobs and not as many skilled nursing jobs. I think part of the reason, this is a little bit of a spoiler about the settings that pay the best, is because skilled nursing jobs usually for travel do not pay very well. And so if you're specifically seeking out the highest paying jobs, or you're looking on job boards and you're sorting by pay, you're not going to see that many skilled nursing jobs because they're usually pretty far down. But I mean, there's tons of therapists out there, tons of travelers that we know that only work in skilled nursing. They take all of their contracts there. They don't pay the highest, but that's the setting they prefer, and they just always do that.
Yep. So, with that in mind, if you're someone who's thinking, I really only want to work in outpatient neuro, or I want to work in, I prefer to build my skills in pelvic health, or I want to be a hand therapist, or I am a hand therapist, and I only want those jobs. Or same thing with like inpatient rehab. You really enjoy inpatient rehab. It's not impossible to see these jobs with travel, it's just not as common. So what we recommend, it's a really great idea that when you're getting into travel therapy that you build a relationship with a recruiter. We usually recommend working with 2 to 3 different recruiters because these jobs are going to pop up occasionally, but because they're more competitive and more people they're more desirable, right? If you have a great relationship with a recruiter, they could tell you about it and try to get you submitted to that job quickly without you waiting to see it pop up on some job board or pop up on Facebook. It's better to go ahead and have that in with a recruiter and have a good relationship with them. So that way in 6 weeks or so, when they do see a pelvic health outpatient job pop up, they go, oh, I remember my traveler, whatever your name is, Brittany, Jacob, Thomas, oh, I remember that traveler is the one of my travelers that wants that pelvic health job. So I'm going to specifically call them and email them real quick before it even hits the website, because they might have just gotten it in their email that morning from one of their account representatives. So internally, they may not have even had time to put it on Facebook or put it on their website, and you could get the in on that job if you have a good recruiter relationship.
Yeah, that's important to remember, because a lot of people really rely on job boards these days. And what you have to remember is that the really in-demand, really desirable jobs are going to go very quickly. And there's been times, I was telling, we had a call with a traveler just a couple days ago. There was a time in the past where I was looking for a very specific setting in Arizona, and I got told about it. They got the job, the company got the job. They called, my recruiter was one of the managers at the time. They called us pretty much instantly. I interviewed for the job within like 30 minutes and was offered the job probably within an hour of when they had gotten the listing. You'll never get that on a job board. Like, it would already be gone. So you need to be in contact. Like, if you want to get the really great jobs, those go fast, and you need to be in contact with a recruiter that's going to have you top of mind and be able to call you or connect with you very quickly.
Yeah. So with that in mind, if you guys are looking for great recruiters to connect with, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to connect you with some different recruiters. Let us know which settings and which things you're more interested in, and we can try to point you in the right direction. For example, we work with a couple of great companies that have more outpatient jobs, more like one-on-one outpatient, which I know is highly desirable for somebody who's an outpatient. They don't want to end up at a mill. I do know some that tend to have like some pelvic health openings, that sort of thing. So reach out to us if you need help getting connected with a great recruiter.
Yep.
In addition to that, when you are looking for more specific setting, you want to definitely work closely with a recruiter to help you find those jobs. You may also just have to be more open on location. If that's your top priority, is to have a certain setting, well, then you can't be quite as picky about location. You're maybe going to see, these specialty settings pop up just here and there, one in this state, one in this state. So if that's your top priority, you need to let the recruiter know, like, I'll be willing to go to any state or at least anywhere in this whole region as long as it's this setting. So it kind of goes, setting, location, and pay. You have to kind of rank your priorities between setting, location, and pay. You can't always get all three. Sometimes you can. Like, for example, if you want to make the most money in home health in California, well, yeah, you can get all three of those things. But if you want to only work in pelvic health, well, then you have to be a little more flexible.
And the compact license really helps with that. So for PTs, if you're at all able to be involved in the compact, the OT, SLP compacts are coming out, I think, in 2024. So, those licenses, being able to be quickly licensed in a bunch of states, PT has over 30 states now, that really helps, because then you can tell your recruiter that you're open to a pelvic health job in any of these 30 states. And then you don't have to go through the whole licensing rigmarole to get that license if a job did pop up.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is, if you're on the fence about getting into travel therapy because you only want to work, or you would prefer to work in a specialty setting, if you're at least somewhat flexible, like, I'd prefer this specialty setting, but sometimes I'm willing to take jobs in this other setting, that will help a lot too. So say you're really interested in pediatrics and you're like, I'd prefer to work in outpatient pediatrics in a clinic. However, I would consider schools. Well, that's going to open you up a lot, because maybe, sometimes you take schools, and then sometimes when an outpatient peds one pops up, you take that also, like say in the summers. So if you can at least be a little bit flexible, or like say you prefer outpatient sports med, but you will work general outpatient, then that's great too, because you can just keep an eye out for those sports med ones while most of the year probably taking more of a general outpatient.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so we're going to talk about the factors that affect travel pay.
Just want to give a shout out to everybody that's watching live. Hey Joey, hey JJ, hey Lauren, hey Katrina, hey Elizabeth, hi Nick, hi Jacqueline, hi Anthony, hi Kayla, hi Donna, hi Don, hey Yosef. Yosef says, my first live video, excited to learn. Yosef also just signed up for our course. Thanks for joining, Yosef. We appreciate the shout out. Hey Sarah, hey Armand, hi Megan. Thank you guys for tuning in. If anyone else wants to say hey in the comments and let us know you're watching, we really appreciate it. Also, if you are learning anything from this video, we'd appreciate if you would just hit that thumbs up button, whether you're watching on Facebook or later on you're watching on YouTube.
Nick says, the specialty I want is the job that gets me to early retirement the fastest. I hear you on that. Those are home health jobs usually.
Yeah, Nick, and that is a really great thing to keep in mind for everybody who's listening when we talk about ranking your priorities between setting, pay, and location. If pay is your top priority, then when you're working one-on-one with your recruiter, you say, I just want the top paying jobs. I want the jobs that are paying $2,000 plus a week. I'm willing to work in this setting, or this setting, and I'm willing to work in any of these 5 states. Well, then this opens up a lot of opportunities for you to chase the high pay.
Yep.
So you just have to know what are your priorities.
All right, so factors affecting travel pay. So this is pretty interesting because for permanent jobs, mainly what impacts your pay as a permanent therapist, if you're thinking about applying for a perm job and they're giving you some kind of salary range, it's mainly reimbursement rates that impact your pay. So how many patients are you going to be seeing per day? What's the average reimbursement rate per patient? They can determine how much in general you'll bill per day, and then extrapolate that over the course of a year, take out a profit margin, and then that's how much they can pay you, right? There's some wiggle room there, but that's the way it works. For travel, of course, reimbursement rates do play a role. But what you have to remember with travel jobs is that is not the only factor that matters, because you could be in a situation, we talked about this before, where they really need a PT, for example. They might have 3 PTAs on staff, their PT just left. There are clinics that will be willing to lose money on a travel PT in that situation. They'll pay you more than you get reimbursed for your services just so that you can evaluate and discharge patients, so that they can have their PTAs treat the patients and they make money off the PTA's treatments, if that makes sense. So they know that's a short-term thing, and they'll be willing to pay more for you to be there, and in some cases lose money on you to get patients in the door and to keep the patients going and to keep their staff, right? Because if they don't have a PT, everything comes to a standstill. So we've seen those situations before. So while reimbursement rates are very important, in the travel world, supply and demand, and then just how desperate a clinic is really do also factor in.
Yeah, so reimbursement rate is definitely going to come into play when we get into talking about which settings tend to pay the highest. For example, the home health companies tend to get reimbursed really well. So do hospitals. So hospitals get a higher reimbursement rate. So if you have a hospital-based outpatient, a lot of times they reimburse better than a private practice outpatient. So reimbursement does play a role in salary for permanent jobs and travel therapy jobs. But as Jared mentioned, supply and demand has so much more to do with it. Because sometimes you'll see jobs in really rural areas where they're just like, we need to keep the doors open. And so we're willing to pay whatever it takes to get a therapist here. And they might have to throw their budget out the window because there's so much need for you. Yep. So if they absolutely, we've worked in rural places where they just literally had 0 PTs, not even a PRN person who could come in and fill in at all. It's 0.
Yeah.
So when they're that desperate, then the supply and demand trumps anything about the reimbursements.
Yep.
So that's going to play a big role.
So another thing that does factor into travel pay is the location and the cost of living of the location. But often new travelers think that plays a much bigger role than it actually does. Because there are situations where you go to an area that's high cost of living and they pay more money. But there's also situations where you go to a place that's high cost of living and they actually pay the same or less. And the reason for that is, again, supply and demand. If you're going to Austin, Texas, or you're going to San Diego, where a lot of people want to go, I would say 25% of the people that contact us, they mention either San Diego, Denver, or Austin. They want to go to one of those places. Obviously, there's a lot of demand for those areas, which means the clinics that have openings there, they don't need to pay as high. So even though the cost of living is high there, the clinics don't have to pay $3,000 a week to get a traveler. They could pay $2,100 and they'll have plenty of applications, right? So cost of living does not correlate directly with how much you'll make.
Yep.
Whereas some people think, oh, I'll go to the Bay Area, I'll make so much money. In some cases you will, but in some cases you won't, because there's a lot of other people that also want to go to the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's something else to consider. And then on the flip side of it, so think about somewhere like Hawaii. A lot of people think, well, that the cost of living in Hawaii is astronomical, so they must pay really well for you to go there. There's a couple reasons why they don't. One of them is supply and demand, as Jared mentioned. They usually don't have problems getting applicants to come and work in Hawaii, especially short term. Now, maybe long term they do have trouble filling sometimes because maybe people aren't willing to move to Hawaii permanently, but they usually don't have trouble getting travelers to come there because travelers definitely are like, yes, I absolutely want to go to Hawaii. What a bucket list place to go for 6 months. So they have plenty of supply. Secondly, the reimbursement rates in Hawaii are very poor for PT. We even spoke to we worked in Hawaii, and I spoke to some of my colleagues there, and they were like, yeah, the reimbursement rates for physical therapy services are low here. And so our salaries, even as permanent PTs, are pretty low here. Whereas somewhere like California, they have really high reimbursement rates. And so they have pretty high salaries. But it's not just the cost of living. It has a lot more to do with the reimbursement rates and the supply and demand. So unfortunately, you might just think, well, how am I going to afford to go there as a traveler? The cost of living is crazy. They have to pay more. Well, sometimes they will, especially if you're one of the only applicants and you're able to negotiate for more. But if they have a lot of applicants who are willing to go there, like in San Diego, sometimes we'll see jobs in San Diego paying like $1,500 a week, even though most jobs in California pay $2,000 plus. It's just because everybody really wants to go to San Diego.
Yeah, Hawaii is a very good example. It's like really illustrates that whole principle, because everyone thinks that you're going to make a lot of money in Hawaii because it's so expensive. But in a lot of cases, you're just barely breaking even in Hawaii, especially if you compare it to what you could make at a permanent job back home. And then people are like, well, why would you go then? Well, everyone wants to go to Hawaii. It's a really amazing place. You get to spend 3 months basically on a vacation. It's really awesome. But you can't expect to go there and make a lot of money. And so just because the cost of living is high does not mean that you're going to make a lot of extra money. But in some cases you will. It just really depends on where you're going and what the demand is for that area.
Yeah. So the one thing that can make the cost of living work to your advantage when you take a job in a high cost of living area, if the facility is offering a high bill rate for that job. And if you're not familiar with the bill rate, we recommend that you read our articles about how the travel therapy pay packages work and how the bill rates work. But basically the bill rate is the amount that the facility is offering. So the hospital or the clinic is offering up for the traveler to come there. If the bill rate is high for whatever reason, whether it's because of the supply and demand, it's the reimbursement rates, whatever, they're like, we got plenty of money to give out. If they have plenty of money to give out and the cost of living is high, that means that the IRS rate that they're allowed to give you for the per diem or the stipend part of your rate is high. So if your travel therapy recruiter has a lot of money to work with from the bill rate, they can shift more of that money to max out your stipends and give you more tax-free money for that high cost of living area, which will mean your paycheck will be even higher for that job. Whereas if there's a middle of nowhere, really rural job where for whatever reason the facility is offering a huge bill rate, the recruiter can still be capped on how much of that money they can put into your tax-free stipends because of the GSA allowance. So there's a lot going on there, a lot of moving parts. I would definitely recommend that you read our pay article and our bill rate article to better understand exactly how that situation is working. But just so you know, sometimes it can work out to your advantage where you get paid a lot more tax-free money if you work in that high cost of living area, but not always.
To illustrate that, if you say a facility is willing to pay $80 an hour for the bill rate to the travel company, and there is for 2 different jobs. One of them is in Alabama and one of them is in San Diego. The take-home pay for the job in San Diego will be higher than the job in Alabama, even though the bill rate's the same. And the reason for that is because the GSA max in San Diego is much higher than the GSA max would be in Alabama, which means that they can give you more tax-free money in San Diego than they can in Alabama, if that makes sense. So in Alabama, you might get $1,000 a week for stipends, and then you might have $35 an hour or $30 an hour for your taxable pay. Whereas in San Diego, they could give you like $1,300 or $1,400 a week for your tax-free part, and then maybe $25 an hour for your taxable portion, and then you end up taking home more money in San Diego.
Yep. So hopefully that makes sense. But just keep in mind, if the facility in San Diego sets a low bill rate, such as $60 an hour, there's nothing your recruiter can do about the bill rate.
Yeah.
In most circumstances. So they can't just max out your stipend if there's not money to spread around from the bill rate that the facility sets. But that was a great example that Jared illustrated, where if it's the same exact bill rate in a low cost of living area versus a high cost of living area, the IRS allowable tax-free stipend will allow your recruiter to max out that stipend and give you more tax-free money when available.
Yep. So a little confusing, but once you get into the travel world, it makes more sense. These stipends and the GSA maxes and things like that. But I can understand it's a little confusing in the beginning, but we do have articles covering all that. We've also made videos talking about bill rates and pay as well.
If you have questions about that, if that was confusing, just drop us a comment, and then after the video is over, I can link to those articles. So just ask us in the comments, like, to explain that whole thing further, the bill rate and all that, and I'll send you the link.
Yeah, or if you have any other questions just in general about travel, we can answer those at the end as well.
Yep. So now that we've kind of gone over some of the factors that affect how travel therapy jobs pay, so one of them would be reimbursement rates for therapy services, one of them would be supply and demand, and the other one may or may not be cost of living. These things all play into how much travel therapy jobs pay. So in general, there's kind of a ranking on which jobs tend to pay the highest, but it's not always the case.
Yep. So in general, home health pays the highest. That has been the case for as long as we've been involved, and before that. Home health jobs always pay the most. That mainly has to do with reimbursement rates. Home health just gets reimbursed more. They also pay better for permanent therapists as well. Second is outpatient. Usually outpatient pays pretty well, like Whitney said. If it's a hospital-based outpatient, they can pay even better in some cases. Or sometimes they don't pay better, they just have you see less patients. So, anybody that's worked in an outpatient clinic, sometimes you'll be double booked. You might have 16 patients a day at a private practice. There's a lot of hospital-based outpatients that you'll see 8 patients or 10 patients. So you're making the same amount of money, but you're seeing less patients, which makes your life better or easier.
Yep, so usually it's home health, and then it's kind of a mix-up between the second one would either be outpatient or hospital, so hospital acute, hospital outpatient. So home health, then hospital, then inpatient rehab is a little bit lower than like your general hospital because, again, inpatient rehab is a little more desirable. You see less patients per day, you get longer with your patients. A lot of people love to work in inpatient rehab. We don't see inpatient rehab jobs quite as often. So again, that supply-demand dynamic, you're going to make a little bit more usually for acute care and outpatient hospital than you are inpatient rehab. And then usually on the lower end are going to be skilled nursing, and then schools tend to pay the worst.
So keep in mind, these are all averages because you might see a skilled nursing job that's paying $2,900 a week. Those pop up sometimes. Or you might see a home health job that's only paying $1,500. Those also pop up sometimes. But on average, that is the ranking. Home health usually pays the best. Skilled nursing schools are usually on the lower end. And then the other settings are kind of in between, with specialty settings are usually even lower than the general settings.
Yep, so again, this is just going to depend. The best way for you to find out which jobs are paying the highest, particularly in the areas and the settings where you want to go, again, is to work with a recruiter. We always recommend you're already in touch with a couple of recruiters so they can send you an updated list of some jobs they have available for the settings and locations that you prefer. You can also get a general idea of the market by looking at job boards such as our Travel Therapy Mentor Hot Jobs list. But again, sometimes these job boards can be misleading because they tend to focus on only the hottest, highest paying, most amazing jobs out there. And that's, a smaller percentage of the total picture of all jobs. So job boards have their utility, but we still think the number one way to do well in this industry is by having a direct relationship with a recruiter.
Yeah, and another thing to remember about job boards, like we talk about job boards quite a bit. We have our own. There's a bunch out there. You have to remember that the really desirable jobs, when we put a job on there that's $3,000 or more, we get a lot of emails about that job. So it goes pretty quickly. We might send 5 people for that same job. So obviously not everyone's getting it. And we know that's the way other job boards work as well. So if you're going on there and you're sorting by highest paying jobs, a lot of times by the time you apply to one of those, really high paying jobs, it's already gone. And so you're giving out a bunch of your information and the job's not even there anymore. So it's not really the best way to find jobs a lot of times. It can work in some situations, but being connected with recruiters and having someone that's like reaching out to you, telling you about jobs that fit your own criteria it's the way to go in most cases.
Yeah, so if you are watching and you're interested in getting connected with some recruiters who can help you with your job search, you can just type recruiters in the comments and I'll send you the link to our recruiter recommendation form, or you can just go directly to our website at traveltherapymentor.com/recruiters and fill out the form. I read each and every one of those forms myself. I look at exactly what type of preferences you have, which states, which locations, which settings, what's important to you. Is it mentorship? Is it high pay? I read each one and then I'll send you back usually 3 recommendations for different companies and recruiters I think would be a good fit for you to help you get started. So with all of that in mind, hopefully you guys have a better idea now about which settings are the most common for travel therapy jobs and which ones tend to pay higher. But also hopefully now you're more informed about the various factors that impact travel therapy jobs and why you might see differences in different settings and locations. If you have any questions, we would love to hear from you in the comments. Just type your comment and we will go through all the questions and give you an answer. If you don't want to type it in the comments or if you're listening later, feel free to send us a message anytime. We're happy to answer any questions. Also, if you are watching, we'd love if you would just hit that thumbs up button and let us know that you got some value out of this. Alrighty.
I already went to it.
Okay. Hey Yosef. Yosef says home health and SNF seem to be the most and highest paying jobs from what I've seen the last 2 months for OT. Yeah. Definitely home health. Skilled nursing is going to be the most common, not always the highest paying, but there are some that are really desperate out there that will pay higher.
Yeah, be careful with the skilled nursing jobs for your first contract though, because they're often not the best. You can find good ones. You have to interview well. You have to ask the right questions because some of those they'll put you in a bad position. So just make sure that if you're going to jump into travel as a new grad, that you're really interviewing well and you're picking a good SNF to start with if you go that route.
Yeah, as a new grad or an experienced clinician, I think Yosef's been out for a couple years. I can't remember, Yosef, if you said you're already working in skilled nursing. If you have experience in skilled nursing, hopefully you'll know a lot of the good questions to ask. I just put some stuff on Instagram the other day talking about my current PRN jobs in skilled nursing and how my productivity was terrible and how, quite often productivity expectations in skilled nursing are just not realistic. So, you really need to make sure to ask a lot of questions about the way the facility is run, how many assistants you're supervising, how the building is set up. Are you going to be the only one doing evaluations? Because the paperwork can really pile up and it can really affect your efficiency and your productivity. So just some things to keep in mind for those skilled nursing jobs. Nick says, I just got a $2,000 a week outpatient job in Augusta, Georgia. It's a low caseload and it sounds like a good learning opportunity as well.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've
Augusta. We're going to the Masters.
We've been seeing a lot more high paying outpatient jobs in the last year to year and a half, way more than we used to see. So that's really awesome. It used to be, there was no way you were going to see a $2,000 a week outpatient job on the East Coast. That was just not possible.
And I would imagine cost of living there is pretty reasonable as well.
Yeah. Hopefully. I don't know. Augusta's pretty nice though, and with the Masters and everything, sometimes they drive the prices up. But
is Augusta near Fayetteville? Is that? No.
North Carolina?
I thought it was like central North Carolina.
Augusta, Georgia?
Oh, Georgia. Shoot. Yeah. Okay.
Jared's geography, not great.
Not great.
Hey Pam. Hey Deanna. Hey David. Hey Margaret. Thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. Let's see. Yosef also says, I live in St. Louis and I'm getting everything prepared to do travel OT. Seems like for these rural Midwest states, there's a huge demand for skilled nursing with rates $2,000 plus a week, but some of them are in the middle of nowhere. The best part is all the listings on Furnish Finder, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace are super cheap for entire housing units. So I'm excited to get started in a few months.
Yeah, if you're willing to stay in the Midwest, you can get some really low cost of living areas and some decent pay rates. I mean, pay rates are not going to be as high as they would be on the West Coast, but also your living expenses are going to be very minimal compared to the West Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we are all about if you can find a job in a lower cost of living area that still has a really good rate, then you're going to come out ahead financially. Sometimes, unfortunately, even if you take a $2,500 a week job in California, you may not come out ahead financially because the housing is so expensive.
Yep.
Nick says, my first travel job was, as we like to call it, initiation by sniff.
Yep.
Dear God, it was awful. That was also my first experience with the travel therapy job, Nick. My very first travel job as a new grad was at a skilled nursing, assisted living retirement community, and I was the only evaluating PT. I was supervising 5 PTAs. I was expected to do every evaluation, every discharge, every progress note. My productivity was well below 50% most days. I cried a lot. So it was trial by fire for sure.
We just talked to another new traveler that took their first contract in SNF, and they're pretty, pretty disillusioned with the whole thing as well.
Yosef, you're too kind. Yosef says that the interview questions that we provided in our travel therapy course that he just started are extremely helpful. And he says anyone who hasn't purchased it yet, you need to do it now. We really appreciate that, Yosef. We spent a lot of time putting everything that we felt like you would need to know to get started with travel therapy and be successful. We had to learn a lot of stuff the hard way. As I mentioned with my first travel therapy job, it was a disaster because I was a new grad. It was 2015. There were not people out there educating about travel therapy like we do now. So we've designed all those resources that we wish we had back then. So I'm really, really glad to hear that it's been helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
He says, yes, I work in skilled nursing and patient rehab in schools. Awesome. Madeline wants to know, do travel jobs offer benefits?
So travel jobs have normal benefits like health insurance, like standard benefits, I would say, but you don't get the benefits of like vacation time or holiday pay, those kind of things that sometimes people consider benefits at a permanent job. So a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's short term. So if you're only working at a contract for 3 months, it's really hard for them to give you any kind of like vacation time. Versus if you're working at a perm job and you're going to be there a year, then it makes more sense to do that.
Yeah.
But yes, you are eligible for health insurance and sometimes life
401k.
Insurance, 401k, all of that through the travel company.
Yep. So you can definitely get benefits. Madeline, if you're new to this, we would recommend that you check out our article at traveltherapymentor.com on benefits for healthcare travelers, specifically the health insurance options, 401k and that sort of thing.
I think it's like the comprehensive guide to travel therapy benefits or something like that.
Yeah. Nick says there are decent options for housing for his upcoming contract in Augusta, Georgia. It's 2 hours from Savannah, 2 hours from Charleston, 2 hours from Atlanta, and 2 hours from Athens, Georgia. Yeah, it's a nice place. We have some good friends that live in Aiken, South Carolina, which is right across, maybe like 30 minutes from Augusta, Georgia. Really nice area.
So not North Carolina, huh?
Nope, not North Carolina. Don't know where you got that from.
I don't know. I think there's a nice golf course in North Carolina I was thinking of.
Maybe. I don't know. Okay, Ruth says, lucky that I've been able to avoid skilled nursing as a travel OT for the past 2 years. Yeah, in general, we personally don't like skilled nursing contracts. We know a lot of people that work in skilled nursing and they're fine with it. You just need to know the right questions to ask. You need to know how to stand up for your license. A lot of people just really get stuck in really sticky, unethical, and illegal situations when it comes to billing practices primarily. So yeah, if you can avoid that stuff, some of them, there are some hidden gems out there, but.
And we know travelers, we always say bad things about SNFs, but we know some travelers that have worked consistently in SNFs for 7-8 years taking contracts, and they do well. I'm sure they get in some situations that are not ideal, but they make it work. So you definitely can if that's the setting you prefer.
Yeah. Yosef says, hey Ruth, would love to chat with you about travel OT. I'm going to be looking to start in a few months. Would love to pick your brain. Yeah, travel OT's got to stick together. It seems like, I think a lot of people get the impression that it's mostly travel PTs that travel, mostly couples that travel, because there's a lot of us, like ourselves, a travel PT couple on Instagram, but gosh, there are so many solo travelers out there. There are a lot of OT travelers too. We don't know quite as many of them that like do Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, definitely reach out, connect. If you guys also want to just join our travel therapy groups on Facebook, there's a lot of good ways to connect with fellow travelers in there.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for all of your engagement tonight and for tuning in. If anybody has any questions after the video, feel free to send us a message, send us an email. Happy to help you get started. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving and can't believe it's almost December.
Yeah, don't forget about the giveaways. We're going to have even more giveaways coming up. But those year-end giveaways are always the big ones, but we'll do some more just regular Instagram giveaways as well. So stay tuned for those. Yep,
and our MedBridge CEU sale will be coming up this week. So if you're like me and you need to get those last-minute CEUs done, keep an eye out on our Instagram and our Facebook for that sale code starting tomorrow.
Whitney's been watching MedBridge at the gym, so we've had some exciting times.
Yeah, and sometimes while we're cooking dinner, yes. Got my little MedBridge on my app. So yeah, we are affiliates with MedBridge and we do run sales and stuff with them, but I am 100% like an actual user. I've been using them since before PT. I used to use them even back for athletic training starting in like 2012. So I'm a big proponent of MedBridge. They make it super easy to get your CEUs done.
Yep. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.